Okay, so you wanted to get a closer look at what's happening with China's economy,
Right.
and especially like what it means with.
With Trump back in the White House.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're doing a deep dive today on
On an interview with Huang Yiping.
oh yeah, this guy is
He knows what he's talking about.
yeah, he's like dean at Peking University, advisor to the People's Bank of China.
And he used to be a senior economist at like Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, the big institutions.
Wow. Okay, so he's been around the block a few times.
Yeah.
So this interview comes out
In the South China Morning Post.
right, and it's like right when China makes this huge announcement about
About debt relief?
yeah, debt relief for local governments.
6 trillion yuan.
6 trillion. That's what, almost $1 trillion US.
Something like that, yeah. Huge amount of money.
So like, what's the thinking there?
Well, Huang talks about what he calls a contraction effect.
Contraction effect. Okay.
It basically means that local governments are so deep in debt that they can't really follow through on any of the policies
Oh, interesting.
coming from Beijing.
So even if Beijing wants to boost the economy, local governments are like, we can't afford to do that.
Exactly. They might want to build new infrastructure or launch some kind of stimulus program, but they're just,
Tapped out.
yeah, they're drowning in debt already.
Makes sense.
Wow.
So this debt relief is supposed to give them some breathing room.
That's the idea. Free them up to actually implement some of these pro-growth measures.
Got it.
But Huang's point is that this might not be enough.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He thinks they need to do even more.
He's actually calling for the central government to increase its own deficit spending next year.
Whoa, even more debt.
Basically, he's saying that the central government needs to step up and provide more direct support to the local authorities.
That's a pretty big gamble, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But it shows you how seriously they're taking the situation. They're willing to take on more debt themselves if it means getting the economy moving again.
Okay, so that's how China's dealing with things internally.
Right.
But then there's, the U.S. side of the equation.
With Trump back for another term.
Yeah, exactly. And Huang predicts that it's going to mean more trade tensions,
Uh-huh.
probably more tariffs on Chinese goods.
Yep. And so he's saying that China needs to be prepared for that.
Okay, so what does that mean, be prepared?
Huang thinks China should focus on boosting domestic demand.
Like getting their own people to buy more stuff.
Exactly. If Chinese consumers are the ones driving the economy, then they're less vulnerable to what's happening with trade.
It's like creating their own safety net, right?
Exactly. If they're not so reliant on exports, then they're not as exposed to tariffs and trade wars.
I see. Okay, that's interesting. But then he throws out this really, really bold idea.
The Chinese Marshall Plan.
Yeah, the Chinese Marshall Plan. Like, can you explain what he means by that?
Okay, so think about the original Marshall Plan after World War II.
Yeah, the U.S. helped rebuild Europe.
Right. Massive investment program, pumped billions of dollars into European economies.
Right.
And Huang is suggesting something similar for China.
But China doesn't need rebuilding, do they?
No, but they do need to reshape their economy, and that's what this Chinese Marshall Plan would be all about.
So what, like huge investments in infrastructure?
Infrastructure, yes, but also things like education and healthcare, and really focusing on boosting domestic consumption.
So instead of relying on exports, China would become more of a self-sufficient economy.
That's the ultimate goal, yeah.
Wow, that's a huge undertaking.
It is. But Huang argues that it's essential for China's long-term growth.
It's like they're trying to build a whole new foundation for their economy.
That's a good way to put it.
And all this is happening against the backdrop of like huge debt, potential trade wars,
It's a lot to deal with, yeah.
That's like they're trying to juggle a dozen flaming torches at the same time.
Something like that.
Well, it makes you wonder what kind of impact this will have on the rest of the world, right?
Definitely.
If China successfully pulls off this Chinese Marshall Plan, I mean, will other countries try to follow suit?
Could be.
Will we see a whole new wave of economic models popping up, all focused on boosting domestic demand?
It's certainly something to think about, yeah.
It really is. Anyway, that's our deep dive on China's economic landscape for today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.